Hi there. My name is Roxane Webster.
And I'm Keith Alba.
We are the owners and partners of my home team at Keller Williams Advantage. And guess what week this is, or what topic this is?
Today is another version of
The Honest Hour.
Back to the work from home edition.
That's right. Back to the work from home edition. As always, if you like this content, head on over and hit the subscribe button so that you get more of it, and the notification bell, ding, so that we will tell you when there's more of it. This is an environment where we try to keep you abreast of our take on the issues of the day that impact the real estate world, and we try to do so with as little spin as possible, except of course
Roxane's patented chair spin. That's the only spin allowed, right?
That's
right.
Absolutely.
This is just kind of our opportunity to come with a non-political view of this, explain some of the things that, hot topics that we're seeing out there in the market, and hopefully bring some clarity in around it and how that will affect the real estate industry.
And too, these topics that we come up with are general, but they're intended to kind of plant seeds on you. And feel free to reach out to us for a more detailed conversation about your particular situation if you've got any questions. We're in a time of real flux right now, and that creates insecurity. Insecurity creates questions or fear. Questions are better because they have answers.
Yeah. And if there's something you'd like to hear our position on, feel free to let us know too. We'd be happy to conduct one of these for specific on a topic that you submit. So today, what are we talking about, Rox?
It is sexy, if not interesting, how the Federal Reserve rates and mortgage rates are related.
Yeah.
We know how to have a good time.
Party for sure.
Party time.
Yeah, obviously there's a lot of headlines that are out there talking about what the Fed has done with their short-term rates and the Fed funds rate and those sorts of things. I mean, we just got news that the consumer price index was at a 40-year high at 8.6. And so the efforts that the Fed is doing in order to curb inflation haven't taken hold yet. And so,
as of yet, what is the consumer price index for dummies?
The consumer price index kind of takes together a lot of the costs that consumers out there, like you and I, when we go out, what are we paying for groceries, for gas, for housing, all of that kind of stuff bundles up. And then they're comparing that to years past, and now we saw a spike of 8.6%. So across all of that stuff, it is becoming more and more expensive for our eggs or milk, or as obviously the gas is a major one that's getting lots of headlines out there. And so,
oh boy, I was just revisiting an article today that said that 15.5% of Americans, if they had an unexpected $400 bill, they wouldn't be in a position to pay that bill, or if they did pay it, they'd be facing food insecurity. So when we're talking about a tank of gas going from $40 to $75 a fill, right, and people's expenses for groceries going up 20-30%, that's real, right? And we don't need to tell you that, we're all feeling it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what the Fed has to do is they have to try and get that inflation under control. They're trying to slow down the economy and see if we can't get some of these prices back in check. Well, the way that they do that is through the Fed funds rate. The Fed funds rate is kind of that overnight interest rate that the banks would charge each other for borrowing of the money. And there's a lot of misconceptions out there thinking that, that 0.75% increase that the Fed just enacted earlier this week is going to translate into a 0.75% increase in the interest rates. And there's not a direct correlation between those two.
Tell me more.
Yeah. It's really complicated and higher than my pay grade. But what I understand of it, right, is yes, it is more expensive for these banks to borrow money from other banks and that sort of stuff. So one thing they need to do to combat that is to increase interest rates that they're charging on mortgages. So there is an indirect relationship in part of those sorts of pieces, but it's not going to be an exact equivalent. So the Fed's fund rate by that 0.3, part of that 0.75, we're not going to see an exact replica of that coming over.
That's such a good point you bring up, because I think sometimes when we hear the news and we hear, okay, 0.75 increase in interest rates, and what a lot of people aren't aware is that the lending institutions for mortgage loans, they know when these meetings are. They know what the Fed has signaled they're intending on doing, and they start gradually inching those interest rates that we're going to have to pay for mortgages. They start baking that in 2 weeks before, right? So it is not unusual before a Fed meeting to see the interest rates that you'll be quoted for a mortgage to nudge up every day for a couple of weeks. So it's already baked in. So if you got a quote for a home mortgage yesterday, or at the beginning of the week, it's not like that we're going to see those rates go up another 3/4 of a point because the Fed had this meeting. They already went up that 3/4 of a point because the mortgage lenders were anticipating that.
Yeah, they definitely went up some. Whether or not it's an exact movement or paralleling of that is to be determined, but yeah, you're definitely going to see it. Now, when we're talking mortgage rates here, I want to be sure we're clear. We're talking about the 30-year fixed interest rates, right? Things like a home equity line of credit are going to be more tied to that Fed funds rate. So
directly.
Yeah,
right.
The LIBOR, any of those sorts of taxes. So if your ARM is, 3 points over LIBOR, you're going to see an increase when the next time your adjustable rate mortgage comes to the adjustment period.
Well, that's a great point, Keith, because when we do look at the Fed, when we read that the Fed has increased the interest rates, there are certain things, like we said, the mortgage rates are related but not directly connected. There are many of the consumer loans that we have that are directly connected. Right. Your home equity line, the Fed goes up, your home equity line will match it. The Fed goes up, your credit card increase will match it. Your auto loan, if you're on an adjustable rate, will go up, right? So there are many, many, many forms of consumer debt. In fact, most of them, if they are not on fixed interest rates, that when the Fed increases, it's directly connected, and you'll see a parallel increase in those things. The one that is not directly tied to, but closely associated with, is home mortgage purchase loans.
Right. Great analogy I heard yesterday. It was actually, rather than being directly related, like brother sister sort of a thing, they said that the Fed funds rate and the mortgage interest rates for 30-year fix are cousins. So there's some connection that is there, but it is not, a direct DNA match.
Good.
Excellent. One of the other factors that definitely has a function in the interest rates for mortgages is going to be the Fed's other policies now that they're reducing their balance sheet, right? So they're no longer investing in mortgage-backed securities. So now you take this major player out of the market that was buying a bunch of these mortgage-backed securities, and you're going to see a lower demand. Back to the supply and demand that's there. What's going to cause more money to come into this is a higher yield or a higher percentage of money that these investors can make. And so in order to accommodate that and to get these mortgage-backed securities to be at a level where investors are willing to pay for them, those interest rates need to go up. That yield needs to go a little bit higher. And so there's a lot of different factors that are in play, but everything is pointing to higher interest rates that are going on. And we're definitely seeing it. We're getting close to at 6%.
Yep. Well, and Keith, just as an aside, I know that a lot of folks are screaming about, oh, this is 08, this is 08, and then they hear terms like mortgage-backed securities, and that only increases that. Talk to us a little bit about mortgage-backed securities and kind of maybe the difference between these and what we saw before. What is a mortgage-backed security?
Sure. So behind the scenes, when you get a mortgage, somebody's giving you that money or giving the seller that money for the purchase of that house, right? So those funds have to go from somewhere. Many times people think it's coming from the lenders, and in some cases it is, but it's a temporary piece, right? They will lend that money up front, get the acquisition, and then they package that loan and they sell it on the secondary market. right? Fannie Mae may buy it. They can package a bunch of those mortgages together and then secure them by selling, they sell a security on the exchange, and they're taking these clumps of assets, all of these mortgages put together, and saying, here's our collateral. This is what we're selling these securities against. And so it's this bundle of multiple mortgages that are a part of these.
So rather than a gold block that's sitting on over there that somebody is buying an interest in, that they're buying an investment in it, and if there were ever any problem with that, all you could sell the gold block, right? The collateral for these mortgage-backed securities, you're basically selling a stock. The collateral for that stock is these bundled mortgages.
Right, which have the actual house as the
collateral. Yeah.
There. So that the house is the bar within those mortgage-backed securities, in your analogy that's there.
Right. And then the mortgage-backed securities, the mortgages themselves are the gold bar in the stock that's being sold, the securities being sold on Wall Street. And so the quality of what's actually in that bar is important. And I, when mortgage-backed securities played a huge role in the Great Recession, but the problem was it's because what that was in that gold bar, all the mortgages themselves were these stupid loans, right? These reverse, they were terrible loans that you'd have
105% loan to value with a 500 credit score, or something along those lines. So yeah, after the meltdown in 08, in that Great Recession, there was a lot of change that came out in, the mortgage world. At one end of the pendulum was where we were at that point, like fog a mirror and ask for money and you can sign a document, we'll give it to you. To after the meltdown, it was needed
proctology visits and DNA samples to get a home loan.
Right. Yeah, 50% down and 800 credit scores or something ridiculous along those lines.
That's
right.
Things
have settled back in a little bit. They're a little bit better, but there's still a lot of underwriting guidelines and things that have to be done that weren't in place when the pendulum was over here.
Most of the people who have home loans right now, it's because they can afford the home loan. Right.
They can prove that they have the income in order to make those monthly mortgage payments. There's a lot of documentation that's going on. We're seeing some creative stuff come back, like bank statement loans or something like. But the lenders are still verifying that there is income coming in. They're verifying the amount of that income and that it's sufficient enough to cover that obligation to make the monthly mortgage payments.
Good. Thanks for clearing that up.
Bundle now is a lot more secure. There's a less chance of default with all of those mortgages that are bundled together. So yeah, it's what's being sold in those mortgage-backed securities now is a lot more secure than where we were back there in that 08. And as soon as that started unraveling, right, all of a sudden the value of those mortgages collapsed, which brought down the housing market, which then, we don't need to go into all that mess, but it was
versus if those values started to collapse and they had to sell that collateral, the majority of those loans are loans where people put 20% down, 10% down. They can afford to pay it. The default rate on that will be much, much lower. And there's in most cases equity to just sell the thing, right? So if we think about it, the mortgage-backed securities in 08 were like a great big pile of nicely formed dog poop with a little bit of gold spray paint on the outside of it. That was the collateral for those securities. Yeah. Now it's actually a gold brick.
Right. Yeah. You scrape back the layer and what was on the top still looks the same versus what was in there before, for sure.
That's right.
So, yeah. What's going to happen, Rox? Break out our crystal ball a little bit. The Fed is continuing to be what they would refer to as hawkish. They're going to continue to push those Fed fund rates. They're continuing to not invest in mortgage-backed securities. So there may be still some room to climb in these interest rates that end up coming out in this year.
From where I sit, I never want to see people's cost of living go up as quickly and as rapidly and as brutally as it is right now. But I remember my parents' reactions and their worries and them robbing Paul to pay Peter and selling things when interest rates were at 18% and when inflation was just in every area of their life, right? And we got to get this inflation under control. We just see what these increases in gas prices and food prices and goods have done to our household budgets. And I keep going back to that 15-16% of Americans who 400 extra bucks throws them in the poorhouse or wondering how they're going to eat. I understand why the Fed is taking this aggressive approach, and I don't think that they will stop raising these interest rates until inflation gets under control. So, I mean, we could see these rates go up as high as 7% by the end of the year, maybe higher.
Right. Potentially, and depends on what continues to happen. I mean, there's a lot of factors that are going into this inflation. There was a lot of money that was pumped into the economy to try and booster it during COVID and the pandemic and that sort of stuff. Lots of spending that was going on by the consumers. I mean, we were getting those stimulus monies, and so there was a lot of money that was going in there, and so things started just exploding. The economy was ripping and doing well. And now we're seeing the after effects of that, especially with the supply chain issues and China locking down with their zero COVID policy. We're going to have some more, supply chain issues. And so the war in Ukraine obviously is having an effect on our consumer prices,
on fuel and consumer prices,
sort of stuff. And so, as of right now, not really seeing any relief in sight that's there. There was hope and discussion last month that we hit 8.4% on the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, and maybe we've peaked, right? And then we get the legs kind of taken out of us with this 8.6 number lately. But I agree, the Fed has to do something to get this inflation under control. It's climbing, it's hitting almost 9% or going higher. That's real dollars to the consumers that are out there. I mean, it's not just this fake number, and we're feeling it at the pump, at the grocery store, at the different places that we're buying this stuff. So we got to get it down, especially because wages aren't rising at that same amount.
That's right.
The delta between raises or the wages and that is coming out of consumers' savings or their budgets or somewhere. And so
that's right.
That needs to get lower so that we can get back to consumers being able to pay their monthly bills and still have some money left over to put into savings, so that a $400 unexpected expense doesn't send them into a major tailspin.
That's right. That's right. Well, gang, thanks for hanging in with us. This was a longer version than usual, but we've been getting a lot of questions on this topic. So drilling it down a little bit seemed like a good plan. Thanks again for joining us for the Honest Hour. Please hit the subscribe button if you like what we're doing. Share this content with everybody who matters. Well, everybody matters. See, now I feel bad. And then go swing on over and hit that subscribe button. Ding, so you know when we're giving you more content.
See you on the next one.